The market basically went nowhere today with the S&P only up 0.02% today, closing at 6389.77. Despite the flat trading, there was actually a lot happening under the surface. The S&P gapping up on the morning and basically selling off throughout the remainder of the day into the 50-period moving average on the 15-minute chart, which is sitting at 63.83. We can see on a 0 DTE basis, the gamma exposure was all concentrated at 63.90. Of course, most of this is going to be rolling off after today's session. We see the next largest gamma exposure concentration is at the 6400 strike. This is obviously dwarfed right here because of all the 0 DTE GEX that rolled off today. So we did see a little bit of a shift in the gamma exposure structure. We're still positively skewed, but this little dip could be the starting point of a larger pullback. So we'll have to see where the market opens tomorrow. We do have the meat of earnings season coming up over the next several trading sessions. There's a ton of companies reporting. We want to be aware of that as we come into these big levels at 6,400. Turning next to the Qs. The Qs largest gamma exposure is at the 570 strike. We also see substantial gamma exposure at the 575 strike as well. Not a lot of volume up there at these upper levels today. However, this uptrend since the beginning of July has been holding strong. And as long as earnings come in line, there could be a continuation of this trend, especially on the Qs, as we see the 50-period moving average on this 15-minute chart has really been holding over the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks.
Thanks, Anthony. Definitely an interesting week ahead, especially with FOMC Wednesday and, of course, big tech earnings. We could definitely see some movement this week. So far, it looks like IWM, which I have pulled up here, it's been consolidating mostly sideways with these false breaks above and below the whole moving average. The whole is currently at 224.22. Now, we closed just barely below that line today. I don't consider it definitive in either direction, which I've been saying for a few days now, apparently accurately so in hindsight. And but we still see the Keltners bullishly angled upward, the lower, middle, and upper Keltner channel, which is kind of flattened out at the upper channel, but we're still pointing higher on the lower two. We have the big GEX cluster at 230. Not a lot of clear indications today in terms of option volume, but I am watching. If we break below this line, which I think would be a good buying opportunity as it lines up with the lower Keltner channel. And lastly, I did notice our 3D graph shows 230 to be a sizable GEX cluster at August 1st. We also see 230 at August 15. So this lacks clarity in terms of whether we reach 230 this week versus a couple of weeks from now. So once again, watching to see where we end up this week. I think we have a shot to hit the higher targets.
Thanks, Sean. Next, let's take a look at Nvidia. Nvidia up 1.88% today, closing just below the 177 level. Ever since this 3-day pullback that we saw about a week ago, Nvidia has been seeing higher highs and higher lows. That continued today. Gamma exposure is the largest at the 180 strike. We're seeing large volume coming in at those strikes as well. Even though it does look like Nvidia may have some more room to run, we are reaching our upper dealer cluster zone between this 180 and 183 level. And so this is an area where dealer selling pressure could kick in. One thing that we are monitoring is the volume at these higher strikes. And so if this starts to really pick up as we approach the 180 level, this could signal that there is further upside to go. From our end, we've been trading Nvidia. However, we are looking for a potential pullback before we re-enter into any kind of swing trade position. You can see that our 50-day EMA is sitting at 152.87. So that's approximately 25 points lower than where price closed today. And so that's a pretty steep space between a major moving average and where price currently is sitting. This rally has been extreme ever since the April lows. And so even though we did have that brief 3-day pullback just last week, what we'd like to see is a pullback perhaps into what has now become support. Previous resistance sitting here around 175, that basically broke out today. And if we see a dip back retesting this support around 175, that could be a potential re-entry for the next leg higher up through the 180 level. Nvidia doesn't have earnings until later in August, so we do have some time. We could even play for the August 15th expiration, potentially a call debit spread, or maybe even selling some premium here at this big 180 strike. We'll be looking at a number of these different strategies in our Discord, which, by the way, I'll put a link in the description below if you guys want to check that out for free.
Thanks, Anthony. Let's take a quick look at the VIX, which of course has been seemingly headed lower and lower, but we are at the 15 GEX cluster, which is the largest cluster we see right now. We see volume at higher strikes mostly. We have some history behind us that shows we're quite unlikely, though it's not impossible, but we're quite unlikely to sustain below 15 unless we're seeing a huge shift in the volatility regime that we haven't seen in some time. So being that we're in the lower dealer cluster zone, we are below the whole moving average too. So I don't want to become too bullish too early on volatility. And we haven't seen any sign yet that the rally is over or that the VIX is prepared to spike. So we do see divergences we want to keep an eye on. The 4-hour chart does show the VIX holding above the whole moving average, potentially maintaining a setup for a VIX spike up toward the 17 area. So we just want to keep an eye on that. Today's drop is still holding that key support.
Thanks, Sean. Next, let's take a look at Snowflake, down 0.38% today, closing at 218.67. Snow has been consolidating just above the 200 level, basically keeps coming back to that level over the last couple of months. However, we are now starting to see gamma exposure growing at some of these higher strikes at the 230 and 240 strike. Between April and May, Snow had a really huge ramp up off of those April 7th lows. The 50-day EMA is finally catching up to it, and this actually looks like an interesting point to take a long position. We've been discussing this a little bit in our live stream. We actually took a tactical trade on this in the last week, which we closed out for a small profit, but we're looking to re-enter here potentially for a swing trade into the August 15th expiration for a move up into this 230 strike. If we zoom in a little bit to our chart, we can just see that over the last few trading sessions, Snow has really started to gain some momentum off of this 210 level. And so now we're approaching the 220 level with large gamma exposure up ahead. This to us looks like a pretty good setup for a potential breakout past these recent highs up into that 230 level. So that's something that we're going to be looking to add into our portfolio as a swing trade here in the coming days.
I'll come back to a ticker that we've reviewed this morning in our live stream that, of course, as you know, we've traded quite frequently with success. CrowdStrike, CRWD. We have positive GEX. We have this big GEX cluster at 500 that stands out with volume today. And I like that we're above the whole moving average. We've also seen the longest consolidation since the rally that started in early April. And so this is interesting. Seems like it's beginning a move higher. Earnings are not until September. So we have a little runway before we need to worry about headline risk. And I like that this 500 strike is concentrated mostly at the August 15 expiry. And it looks like CRWD has a good setup to potentially hit that mark.
And for a limited time, you can get $300 off our yearly Portfolio Manager tier subscription. Use code SUMMER2025 at checkout. We've got a few spots remaining, but this limited time promotion is ending soon, so definitely take advantage of it while you can. Members get full access to our gamma exposure dashboard, our option flow analytics tools, as well as our algorithmic trading strategies. And you'll also get access to the premium channels in our community Discord. There's a ton of great traders in there sharing their own trade setups, and you can also track our trades in real time as we manage our options portfolio. I'll put links in the description below for all of that so you guys can check it out. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.